The following is a Shaw TV public affairs presentation.
Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Constituency Report on Shaw TV. I'm Megan Mills, and joining me in the studio today is Selina Robinson, the New Democrat MLA for Coquitlam-Maillardville. Welcome to the show, Selina.
Really glad to be here, Megan.
Thanks. So the spring session that we're in is slowly drawing to a close, and I'm wondering if you can just share with us your reflections on how it's been from February up until now.
Well, it's been a very full spring session with lots of activity, lots of bills to be debated. Right now we're going through the Agricultural Land Reserve Bill, and that's been fascinating for me. I guess a relative newcomer to British Columbia. I came in the 70s, and so wasn't around when the ALR first came into being. But so having an opportunity to do some of the historical research has been fascinating. I also had a chance to be first responder on a number of different bills for local government, which is typically not a ministry that generates lots of bills, but this time actually brought forward 5 different bills, which is an alarming number of bills. So I really got to sink my teeth into that and got to ask a number of questions during question period, which was always a treat.
Absolutely. And I understand as well that you had an opportunity to present your first private member's bill. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that.
I did. Well, that was really, for me, very exciting. And it was a private member's bill that was generated in my own mind and in the Coquitlam community when Shin No disappeared. He's a Korean fellow with middle stage Alzheimer's in his early 60s, and his family didn't know that he was wandering. And when he disappeared back in September, the family didn't really know what to do. I mean, they called police, and police did their thing, and search and rescue went and did their thing, and there wasn't a coordinated response. And this family took it upon themselves to use social media to call out to friends and anyone else they were connected to help look for their missing dad. In this case, it was the adult children. And I went out in end of September. It was miserable days, but there were hundreds of people. I was just overwhelmed with the community support. People from all over North Van Surrey, they were just descending on Coquitlam and checking in where the base was and saying, how can I help? And they were being sent out by these people who don't know nothing about search and rescue, but being sent out. There was a sighting here, there was a sighting there, can you go? And what struck me was, we needed to have a coordinated response. And if there had been a coordinated response, then perhaps we would have found Mr. No. Here we are 9 months later, and he's never been found. It's been absolutely heartbreaking for this family. And so that was the motivation behind putting forward this private member's bill early in the session, and to ask government to put together a coordinated response protocol that would help communities respond when these sorts of things happen. And given the number of people with Alzheimer's, given that we're going to see a growing number of people affected by dementia and Alzheimer's in coming years, given that we know that most of them will be cared for at home, we need to make sure that we are well prepared and well equipped to manage some of the incidents of wandering that we're going to see.
So I understand that you're also the critic for local government and sports, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about what that critic portfolio entails.
Well, people would say it's not the sexiest of portfolios. It doesn't get a ton of media attention, but it's really, I think, really important because it's local governments that really build communities, and I feel very strongly and very passionate about building communities so that they're resilient, that they have the capacity to steward their way to having the things that they need so that everyone in that community can have a good life. And we know that local governments do a pretty good job of making sure that people have their needs met. And the best example I have of this is I was at a presentation where Naheed Nenshi, the mayor of Calgary, was speaking. He was at a conference in Penticton that I was at, and he was talking about the flood response that the city of Calgary had to do a year ago. And he said, in terms of the value of local government, he said, if our federal government just somehow magically disappeared for some reason, federal government just disappeared, it might be a month before anyone notices. And if our provincial government disappeared, it might be a week. But if your local government disappeared, it might be an hour before you notice. They're the folks who take away garbage. They're the ones responsible for getting rid of our water, our sewage. They're the ones responsible for making sure that we have clean water coming to our homes. They manage the roads, the street lights, the sidewalks, the parks that we take our kids to play in. So those are the things that local governments do. So my critic portfolio is about making sure that local governments have the tools and the things that they need in order to make the decisions that they need to make, so that when people living in community have a need, that they can respond as readily and as flexibly as they can.
I'd like now to talk about some issues that are important to British Columbians, one of them being affordability. And I'm wondering if you think if life has perhaps become a little bit less affordable under this government.
Oh, I think it's become considerably less affordable. Certainly with MSP premiums going up, the hydro rate increase. And I have a really good example of in conversations that I've had with some people. One of the things that I do to connect with people is I try at least once a month to go and knock on some doors in my community. And I ask them, is life more affordable, or what are some of your challenges? And there's an affordability factor that I hadn't even thought about that I learned from my constituents, and that has to do with the Portman Bridge tolls. And they would talk about, here we are in Coquitlam, we're on sort of one side of the bridge, and we often think that people tend to go west. But there's a whole lot of people in my community who actually go east. And they now have to pay this toll, $6 a day. And oftentimes, because transit is so poor from Coquitlam to Surrey, if there's two people in the household who work in Surrey, they have to each take separate cars. So now they're paying $12 a day as a family. And that adds up, and it adds up over time. And they are finding that that's absolutely ridiculous. And they really haven't benefited dramatically. They're finding that their travel times, certainly to work, haven't changed at all. And they're pretty frustrated. And they haven't been taken into account when the tolls were first proposed.
I'd like to talk a bit about schools in your community, and school funding can be an issue across the province, but in particular perhaps in your community as well. I'm wondering if your school district is adequately funded in your community.
School District 43 has been very vocal around some of the challenges around making sure that they have that they balance their budget, taking care of student needs. They faced a $13.4 million budget this year, deficit this year for their budgeting. They had, I believe it was 4 different budget consultation meetings that saw a record number of parents come out, because parents know that when you're facing that kind of challenge, that it means real cuts. And we're not talking about fat on the bone, we're talking about cutting into the bone. And in this case, that's exactly what they've done. So we have a school district that is actually has just laid off 600 teachers. Most will get rehired, but we know that they've actually made cuts to like 38 teacher librarians, 4 psychologists, I think about 6 or 7 speech pathologists, and they've really chopped up those specialty areas. So children who are integrated into our school system, children who might have speech problems and communication problems, children who have challenges sort of adapting to changes that are going on in their life or changes going on in the school, they won't have access to these supports, and we know that that's going to be it's going to fall to teachers to manage, and it's going to be unmanageable. And one of the things that I'm really proud of Coquitlam residents is that they see that, the parents in Coquitlam, and they organized a rally a number of weeks ago, speaking with those parents who've organized that, because they know that this is enough, that the politicians better get it together and start speaking out for our children, and I've certainly been doing that. I attended the rally. Want parents to know that as their representative, I'm prepared to speak on behalf of their children and their needs, because no child should be left behind because we aren't funding schools properly. And this has been going on. This isn't new. This has been going on. This underfunding of schools has been going on for at least 10 years. And so at some point, schools and school districts just can't manage anymore. And I think if we take a look over time, what schools have been doing each and every year, the school districts have been taking some contingency funds or some savings that they've been able to put aside for special projects, and they've been slowly eroding that. And this year, I think what we're seeing is that there's nothing left. There's no other place to squeeze money, and so that means services have to go, and that's not okay.
And do you think that the current government is doing enough to address this ongoing issue?
I think the current government just cares about their AAA credit rating. At least that's what I've heard from two MLAs from the two different rallies that I was at. The MLA for Port Moody Coquitlam, Linda Reamer, came out, and Mark Dalton in Maple Ridge. I attended that rally. And the only thing they could speak to was how important it is for government to protect their AAA credit rating. And this outraged many parents, because when you don't invest in your children, it doesn't matter what your credit rating is, because down the road, we're not going to have the skilled workers that we need. They're not going to be able to do simple math problems, and they're not going to be able to read and write and be literate. And that's not okay. So parents are recognizing that, and I think the word is spreading all across the province that this government needs to step up and start actually properly funding schools.
We have just a few minutes until we take our break, but I just have another question about affordability in your community, and I'm wondering, we hear a lot about young families, issues about childcare and affordable housing, and I'm wondering if either of those things come up in your community.
Oh, it's a huge problem. Coquitlam is what I'll call a traditional suburb, sort of built up in the 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and so we have mostly single-family dwellings. There's not a lot of apartments, there's not a lot of rental, and when senior levels of government got out of subsidizing purpose-built rental housing, it became really problematic. And so certainly in Coquitlam, there's some real challenges around housing affordability, where families aren't able to really make ends meet. And what I hear actually on the doorstep is, the thing they want most is they want more time to spend with their families, but because they have to pull in extra shifts, because they have to take on extra jobs, they just don't have the time, and that's really disheartening for them, because it's not the dream that they had when they were raising their families.
Absolutely. And sorry, just one last quick question. I'm wondering as well, healthcare comes up so much in the House during session, and just you hear about it throughout all the communities of BC, and I'm wondering, is hospital overcrowding and long, ER wait times, are those issues that come up in your community?
Those are substantial as well. We find that there are certainly lots of stories that abound in my community about people in hallways, and I actually earlier in the session unfortunately had to spend a few days myself in Emerge and in hospital, and witnessed people being put in hallways, which I think is embarrassing for everybody. It's not how you do medicine, and it's something that this government really does need to address.
All right, well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes on Constituency Report. Welcome back to Constituency Report on Shaw. My guest today is New Democrat MLA Selina Robinson. Welcome back, Selina.
Thank you, Megan.
I'd like now to talk about some local issues that are unique to your community, and one of them being the use of the Riverview lands. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about maybe what Riverview is and what's been going on there.
Well, Riverview has been around my community for over 100 years. It's over 200-acre site that has some of the most beautiful buildings. Certainly the legislature is beautiful, and this sort of ranks right up there with beautiful buildings. And it was operated as a mental health institution for most of those years. And a number of years ago, about 20 years ago, there was some recognition that institutionalized care isn't the best form of treatment for people with mental illness, that community care is sort of the direction to move in, and they started to close Riverview, which was, I believe, a good decision. Unfortunately, governments, certainly in the last 14, 15 years, haven't done its job in making sure that we had community care for those people living with mental illness, but that's a different topic. So right now, Riverview has a number of people still living on the site. It's contracted out to service providers who provide mental health services. But the question remains, what do we as a community want to do with this 244-acre site? What does the province intend to do with these lands? My very first question in the legislature back in July was a question to Minister Coleman about what the intentions are. And we got an interesting answer. It was the most interesting answer we've had in all these 14 years, which is we're going to consult with the community, and which I'm pleased that that's happening. So there's a consultation phase happening right now. There are some criteria about the consultation in that what this government is saying is that anything that is that happens on the site needs to be costed out and paid for by the site itself. So the message is we have no money to do anything but, put your little hearts in there and tell us what you want. So it's this bit of a double-edged message. Right now, they've gone through first round of consultations, and hundreds of people have come out, which is not what you often see around these sorts of consultations. So it tells us that people see that there's real opportunity and that there's real need, and we're just heading into the second round of consultations. And I look forward to see what the community has to say. And so far, in terms of themes, what I've heard is people really still want this to be a center for mental health and wellness, addictions, treatment, and supportive recovery, housing, that kind of stuff. There's also recognition that there's a fabulous arboretum and wonderful gardens on the site, and that needs to be retained as part of the site. So we're still looking to see what will happen, and I look forward to the end product of the consultation process.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about transit. I'm wondering, have there been any service cuts in your community?
Oh, there has been huge service cuts. In fact, Riverview was one of the areas where there was services cut, and the impact, this was very interesting. So we have people who have mental health issues still living on the site. We also have government services being provided from the site, including youth probation. And transit, because of ridership questions, there were some concern about not as much ridership as there ought to be. They've cut service through the Riverview site. So these people who really don't have cars, they don't have access to vehicles or alternatives, they can't afford taxis, they actually don't even have access to transit. That's really problematic. As well, we've had service delivery cuts through United Boulevard Corridor, which is our industrial area that employs thousands of people. And I've been speaking with local businesses in the area that run large corporations, large businesses, and they're very frustrated that their employees can't get to the work site, and even if they could drive or had access to vehicles, there's not enough parking for all of their employees because it was built on the premise, they were there on the premise that there would be transit for their employees. So it's become a real problem for a number of our businesses. And it's really hard to maintain ridership if you keep cutting it, and then people have to get vehicles or find alternate forms, and so you'll never get the ridership. So it's one of these catch-22s that we're seeing around bus service in the suburbs.
And just on the same topic of transit, I'm wondering, the Evergreen line, is that something that affects your community, or?
Well, it's a new asset for my community. It technically doesn't come through Coquitlam-Millardville at all. It bypasses us completely. So the two stations that will serve my constituency the most, Braid Station in New West, Lougheed Station in Burnaby, people will be able to access certainly Burquitlam, which is technically not in my constituency, but people will be able to access it. That's not a problem. Those three stations, none of them are designated to have park and ride facilities. So TransLink, in its wisdom, and I think it's fabulous, has designated that there will be 500 park and ride facilities. Recognizing that bus service is being cut, this is a traditional suburban community used to cars. Let's at least get people to drive to transit stations, park their cars, and use transit to get downtown or to Surrey or to New West or to Burnaby. Let's have them at least use this new asset part way. But people in my constituency will actually have to drive backward along the line to park their car, to move forward along the line. And so I've been advocating for a couple of hundred spots, park and ride spots, either at Braid Station or Lougheed, or even Burquitlam, but certainly Lougheed and Braid would be the more ideal spots. It's been to no avail because the Minister of Transportation says, well, it's up to TransLink, and TransLink, of course, has no money because they're not properly funded, and so it becomes really problematic, but certainly my 50,000 constituents won't receive the same benefits as the others do in other parts of Coquitlam and Port Moody.
Right. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the Burquitlam Lions Care Senior Center. I understand that there may be some issues going on there.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story because I got this surprise email back, I believe it was in January, that from Fraser Health that said, we're just letting you know that Fraser Health was ceasing its operating agreement with Burquitlam Lions Care Center, and we want to let you know because it's in your constituency and you're the MLA. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I better, contact the executive director over at the facility to find out what the plan is, what do they need, what's going on. And when I sent him a note, he said, Selina, this is the first I've even heard of it. And that was quite surprising that Fraser Health had communicated with me before they even communicated with the organization. And then discovered that I wasn't supposed to be communicated to, that they were going to be holding off. And at this point, though, the cat was out of the bag. What I find really frustrating and disappointing is that Fraser Health did a number of things. They decided to cease the operating agreement back in December 2013, but they continued to transfer frail elderly into this facility, not telling them that the facility that they were being transferred into was going to be closing in less than 2 years. And I think that's ethically and morally wrong. The other thing that I learned about the fact that they were closing this facility, they never permitted Burquitlam Lions Care Center to bid on an RFP process for redevelopment. They just direct awarded it to a private operator in Port Coquitlam and just said, we'll just give you these 76 beds. So it's very, very disappointing that this government and Fraser Health don't even follow their own rules to make sure that things go out for public tender and that people are respected and their ability to make decisions about whether or not they actually want to transfer into a facility that's going to be closed in a number of years is even an option, and that's very disappointing.
Absolutely. As we near the end of the show, I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the outreach you could do with your constituents and perhaps how your constituents can get in touch with you.
Well, outreach is my favorite thing, and I prefer to just call it connecting. So I get on the doorstep at least once a month. One afternoon a month, I go out for 2 to 3 hours and just talk to people about things that are important to them. I'm just in the process of putting together my first annual report that will be in our local newspaper, so everyone will be able to see what I've been up to. I have an electronic newsletter that I send out once a month. In fact, when we're done here, I have to go out and put that together for May. So people who want to be on that can just fire off an email to me, say put me on your newsletter. It's short, I keep it brief, just to let people know about some of the things that I'm dealing with, things that are going on in the community. I also host coffee talks where we just gather in a local coffee shop. I'm there, and you're more than welcome to come and join me and have a cup of coffee and talk about what matters most to you. I've hosted a number of town hall meetings and as a place for people to gather as a group and hear what we have to say and hear questions. So making sure that I'm representing people is really important, and the best way I can do that is hearing from others. And so looking for ways to make sure that people have access to me is really important, and I just invite them to follow me on Twitter if that's what's going to be easiest, or check me out on Facebook. And certainly I find a number of people actually do that, and it's an excellent way to communicate.
Wonderful. And I understand that you have some photos here today.
I do.
So hoping you can tell us a little bit about
Sure.
those. Yeah, we are on the screen.
So this was at our first annual Easter egg hunt, and we were swarmed. We didn't know what to expect. We were swarmed with about 150 children and their families, and the Easter Bunny made an appearance, and he was swarmed far more than I was. We were giving out chocolate, and just again, it's an opportunity to talk with parents about what some of the challenges were, and we certainly talked a lot about what's going on in the school district and hearing from parents about those sorts of concerns. It was a great day.
Nice.
And this was an opportunity for me to connect with a number of immigrant women, mostly from Israel. Some came from Russia via Israel, and talking about the political landscape and what was important to them as new immigrant women. And again, we had fabulous conversation. They're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about their children's post-secondary education, as well as their public education. And those are some of the things that they had to say about their experiences. And this is me talking with Gary Pooney, who is helping to facilitate the Riverview Lands consultation process. And the people in the back were really busy looking at different ideas and having conversations. And Gary and I were just talking about, what are the next steps for the Riverview consultations, and I look forward to seeing sort of what the report is on that one.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time today, but I want to thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure, Megan. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And thank you for watching Constituency Report on Shaw.